back to the 9th edition of the Hindu Lit for Life Festival. We now step into session 4. They sit deep inside me. You wrote yourself a poem of it. Ulrike Almut Sandig in conversation with Nandini Krishnan. Ulrike grew up in a parsonage in Novalde and now lives with her family in Berlin. She's published 2 prose books, 3 pop music albums, radio pieces, as well as 4 volumes of poetry. In 2018, she received the Willem Lemon Prize and Karen Leader's English translations of her poetry books, Thick of It and Grim, which were published. Nandini Krishnan is a writer, dancer, and stage actress. She is the author of 2 books of non-fiction, Invisible Men Inside India's Transmasculine Networks, published in October 2018, and Hitched, The Modern Woman and Arranged Marriage, published in 2013. We now open the session to them. Welcome.
Thank you very much for that. Hello. I've really enjoyed reading Ulrike Almut Sandig's poems, and what I find most fascinating about your poetry is that you look at very dark subjects and also very playful things, and you somehow manage to put them all in the same collection, and all of it makes sense. And so we will read a few samples from her poetry, but you know, she speaks about illness, about rape, about torture, about xenophobia and migration. At the same time, there are fairy tales, there's biblical imagery, and then again, there's a sort of playfulness throughout your poetry, which even comes through in the English translation. So I can only imagine that there's a whole lot more which cannot be translated at all.
There's always I mean, translations of poems are always like as if you write a poem from scratch. So it's always like a poem in itself. It's not only translation. So this edition of Thick of It wouldn't have been as great if there wasn't my gorgeous translator Karen Leader, who is a professor in Oxford University, and she translated a lot of German poets from the generation before me, and I'm very glad she did this intense and thoughtful work for me, with me. Yeah.
And also, I mean, this is the fact that you are fluent in English. You read poems in English. You speak fluently.
Well, not as fluent as Indians are, because in Germany, English is really taught only at school. So we don't have English as in our everyday lives, apart from when you live in certain districts in Berlin, for example. But usually, it's not a bilingual country as it is here.
Yeah, which is why, I mean, the fact that you're so fluent surprised me a little bit. And I was wondering, was there ever a point of time when you considered translating yourself?
No, never. I translated some poets from other languages. For instance, from the English, from New Zealandian English, there's a poet I like a lot, and I translated a lot from her work or from other poets' work that I admired, but I would never translate into a language that is not my mother tongue, because this still is a foreign language to me.
Right. So I think without any further ado, maybe we should get straight to the reading, and perhaps you can start with a little bit of an introduction about the book from you, and then you said you'd go with Red Rover, Red Rover.
Yes, the book Thick of It is actually, let me count, it's my 3rd volume of poetry and my 4th book all in all, because I also write short stories, and I do work with musicians and writing radio pieces, but being poetry, this is my 3rd collection, and it is, I want you to imagine it as an imaginary journey from north to south of our globe, but throughout the globe, through the globe, not on the surface of the globe, because it deals with being at home, having a heimat, having a place where you are from, and carrying this place where you're from throughout your life, and interfering with the place where you are from with your current places. So the place where you're from is kind of as if it was your own body. That's why it goes through it. So there's 3 chapters. One is north, one is the middle of the earth, which is actually only one poem of 4 lines long, and the third one is south. And the southern one, being in Germany, south, actually in Germany, south is always in the literature has been a place of longing. South means for our cold country and rainy country. It's the place where we long to be. It goes back to Goethe, who wanted to be in Italy and then went for it and then wrote imaginary nice things about Italy. So South was always the thing that we longed for, and that's what basically the structure of the book is.
I really like that, because going south normally means...
Sure, yeah, that's the total difference in India, I guess. No, not really, but many people seem to be longing for the north, for Kashmir, for instance. Yeah. So should I start with the little thing?
Yes, please do.
So I'm starting in German, but don't be desperate. I'll turn to English very soon enough. Mein rechter Platz ist leer. Ich wünsch mir alle Freunde her. Ich wünsch mir, dass keiner nach Haus muss, wenn das Fest noch nicht aus ist. Ich wünsch mir kein Dickicht mehr in uns hinein, nur noch um uns herum. Ich wünsch mir den Wind in die Äste, die Spiele im Schatten, die rauschenden Feste, bis sich die stoffblaue Nacht um uns legt und uns wie Kinder nach Hause heimträgt. Red Rover, let all my friends come over. Let them all come to stay, not go away. Let not a single one leave before the party's done. Let there be no more forest growing inside us, only round us. Let there be wind in the trees, games in the shade, parties like these, until, like children in the blue of night, we are taken home, tucked up tight. Thank you. So now there is a pair of poems. One is Being Inspected, and one is Chorus. And Think of It has a lot of paired poems, because I like to look at things from 2 perspectives, to have a close look at them, or to have a stereo vision of them. And both poems deal with the atrocities and the German past in the 20th century and World War II. And the first poem that I'll read for you, Being Inspected. Can you hear the feedback, or is it just for us having feedback on stage? I might go a bit away. Yeah. It's fine? It's fine for you? Okay, good. So, on the first one, Being Inspected goes back to a story that is very usual for Germany, but this story happened in Leipzig, in a place close to where I come from. see, this is all about where I come from. And it's about, this happened in 1938, where families of Jewish culture or of Jewish heritage, not only Jews, were collected from their houses, picked up from their houses, and they were forced to stay in a riverbed, dried up riverbed, close to the zoo, in order to, as a form of torture, basically, because the neighborhood of that area, of that riverbed, could watch them stand for days until they were finally deported. Here is the passage from the street back to winter 1938. The small, inconspicuous curtain of history. A child-sized gate and the iron railings. 6 steps down to the dried-up riverbed close to the zoo. Waiting 2 days, having to stand with their stars and being inspected in broad daylight. Then finally off to the station, into the trucks when the first fell like flies, like chaff. And later again, the little wood of beach and snow, und Buchen und Schnee. That is where this story ends. But here is the passage. Here is where it all starts. Stop. And the second one. There's a strong right-wing shift now in Germany. It is different from the one in India, but it is a right-wing shift that threatens our democracy a lot, and that is what this poem deals with. How to deal with your past. When the loudspeakers are silent, the spotlights are dimmed, when the sound of the last chorus has died away behind the scenes of history, when the actors' uniforms have been hung up and the cleaners have gone home, when the auditorium stands quiet in the half-light, that's when you get back up on stage and say after me, the whole thing was not real, and no one here came to any harm. So say after me, the whole thing was not stop. Thank you.
In her introduction to the translated version, your translator Karen says, "You're a brilliant performer, and I can see why." And so, though it's a language which is an acquired language, it's been so fantastic to hear you, even in English. And I was just thinking that a lot of your poems, and particularly Red Rover, it has a sense of innocence, the playfulness that I was speaking about. But also there's a sense of loss, of something sinister, of danger.
Surely, yes.
Yeah, would you like to talk a little bit about what inspires this?
Yeah, it's I've been working on the subject of disappearance or vanishing of beloved things and persons for several books now. The book I wrote after Thick of It is a prose collection. It's a short story collection, and it's entitled Book Against the Disappearing, because I somehow wanted to get rid of this subject. And I find after this book, I find myself still being drawn in. But particularly for Red Rover, it is to me, it's a core poem on the subject of disappearance, because I wrote it. It's an autobiographical poem. I almost never write autobiographically, but this time I did, because my father suffered a few heart strokes, by some yeah, but he was lucky and recovered and got 60, and for his 60th birthday ages ago, I wrote him this poem, and it was, and that is why, you know, I have this perspective from a child, or very close to, like, looking as myself as a child being tucked up tight as night, but also it is a wish, kind of a wish for him to be tucked up tight whenever there's the next heart stroke, because there definitely kind of perhaps will be something like that. So, and this is, to me, it's very rare to work autobiographically.
Yeah, especially in poetry, because poetry is such a powerful medium.
Yes, and when readers read poems, they tend to think that it's all autobiographical, but what I prefer doing, rather than writing from the autobiographical perspective, is dealing, or kind of doing a research on the subject of saying I in the poem. So what does it mean if I say I or you? How close is the I to the you? And is it perhaps more close to the real life when I avoid my own, or when I keep my own life out of it? Or what does it say? And also, what does it do to how does it affect the poem, the fact that I am a woman writing, and how does it affect the audience? So this is, writing poetry for me is not, it's not about emotions mostly, it's more a form of research with the means of poetry, I'd say.
That's very interesting. So let me move on to the companion poems that you wrote, Being Inspected and Chorus. And when I read them, I didn't realize that they were meant to be companion poems, because chorus immediately reminded me of the Greek chorus and the stage. And there's something very eerie about the poem. And now when I heard you reading the two out, I was thinking about how Germany is one of the few countries that has completely owned up to the guilt of a past. There have been various countries which have refused to apologize. This is still constantly going on between India and England.
Exactly.
And several colonies of England, of imperial countries, basically. And in Australia, where the Prime Minister once refused to apologize to the Aboriginal people who had been displaced, and it was Julia Gillard, I think, who finally made the apology. So there's this whole thing of, if it wasn't you who perpetrated a crime, should you be carrying the guilt for it? And I think Germany is one of those countries where everyone who was born much, much, much after the Holocaust still carries a sense of guilt. So could you talk a little bit about that, about growing up with that sense of having to own up to a crime, which you personally did not commit?
Yeah. Well, there's two ways, of course, to deal with this. One is to deny your... to deny the fact that you have to do with your own past, and I know a lot of people who do it that way, but that is only possible when you don't go abroad, because as soon as you go abroad, people want to talk to you about Hitler, and as you all know, Hitler is important also for India, because people talk a lot about him as a reference to different things, to nationalism, to how to deal with economics and nationalism. So Hitler is always certain. He's always in our minds in a way. So, and I found myself as I'm abroad quite often. Abroad meaning out of Germany. I have no choice. So I need to deal with my past and also with my family past, of course, because we all have kind of a past in one or another terms. I have to deal with like at least once a day. There is no single day when I find myself completely free of history. That's very much being German, I guess.
Interestingly, J.M. Coetzee speaks about this in the context of, in his book Elizabeth Costello, he speaks about being vegan or vegetarian or being pro-animals. And the silence of people who don't do anything about animals screaming. And he compares it to German homes, which were near concentration camps. And they could hear the screams, but the crime was silence. And I found that very interesting. And I find it very interesting that generations in Germany have owned up to the crime. But at the same time, and this is something which I've only heard from friends because I've never been to Germany, but everyone whom I've met from Germany abroad seems very, very open and very interested in learning new cultures. But I hear that there's a sort of culture of xenophobia and racism within Germany. Would you like? And you mentioned now that there's a shift towards the right, which I think is being echoed across the world in various parts of Europe, of course, with Trump and his buttons and Twitter, and in India as well. So.
Yeah, well, of course, there's this shift due to the globalization, people would say, but we don't have the final answer where this all comes from, but that might be one of the reasons. But in Germany, it also has to do with the way we dealt with our family traumas, of course. I am from the eastern part of Germany, so this is the GDR, the former socialist part of Germany. And in my generation, we were told in school that the eastern part has been completely denazified. So that our generation would be free of national socialistic thinking, which is dangerous because it wasn't that way. And so my generation, when we were teenagers, they were like, you had to have a choice, you had to make a choice. You would be requested to either be left-wing or right-wing, and the uncool people were neutral. See what I mean? So and of course the right-wing youths there were like rival situations, and they bat up the left wings, the punks, and this all was seen as adolescence problem, as a puberty thing to do, and so the police never really interfered. The problem is that now we have all grown adults and have children, and these. So there is in the eastern part of Germany, in my age, there is a large number of people who really tell their children that Holocaust is a question of, that Holocaust is not historical fact, that it is a state opinion. And so see, there was a kind of blindness from the governmental side because the eastern part was told to be so free of all this. So what we now have we have the situation that in certain parts of eastern Germany, the right-wing party AfD is the second largest or the largest, depending on the next elections, party in the district, and they don't. So and they don't get into distance to violence. So there were hunts throughout city centers, people who were of darker color or who only had black hair, even though some of them were really born in Germany, were hunted through the city, and the police didn't interfere because the police itself doesn't have sometimes perhaps a focus on their own blind spots. So there is a huge problem a huge problem to maintain a democracy right now.
And you also, from your poems, it appears you're very troubled by the refugee situation and the fact that, I mean, Germany has been largely, the program to apply for asylum is quite generous, but But I know that people are stuck for months and months and months and
for
nothing happens.
years.
Right.
People who arrive in Germany and their best and most productive years around their 20s or as teenagers, they are stuck in asylum seekers' homes or flats with other asylum seekers for 4 or 5 years without being allowed even to work. So, and of course, these young male people are also traumatized by what they've seen throughout in their countries and also throughout their journeys to come to Germany. So it isn't as sparkling as it might look from the outside.
Right. So there's this beautiful. I mean, I don't even know what to call it. It's a video, which is a sort of work of art. It's poetry. It's also playing with various media. So maybe we can play it and then talk about it.
Yeah, let's play it.
Versteht mich nicht falsch. Wir kennen uns nicht. Ich kenne mich doch selbst nicht. Ich stehe morgens auf und weiß nicht, bin ich es? Bin ich es? Wer war dieses Kind unterm Rock seiner Mutter? Ich bin die Mutter, ich bin die Tochter, ich bin der Schatten zum sich drunter verstecken. Ich bin ein Feld voller Raps, verstecke die Rehe und Leuchte. Wie 13 Ölgemälde übereinander gelegt. Ich bin die Landschaft, ich bin die Jägerin auf freier Flur. Ich bin die Landschaft, ich bin die Jägerin auf freier Flur. Befinde mich auf dem Hochstand am Waldrand und zähle die Rehe im Feld. Freunde, seht ihr mein kurz geschnittenes Haar? Ich lasse es flattern im Winde. Kurz geschnittenes Haar. Ich lasse es flattern im Winde. Ich bin ein Text, der zum Ende hin ausfranst. Ein Stück nur von einem Soldaten. Seine Brauen, die Waden oder sein Galgenhumor, den er schließlich verlor, als er den Schießbefehl an eine klägliche Reihe zu junger Soldaten nicht erteilte, weil in der noch kläglicheren Reihe vor ihm eine Schwangere stand. Ich bin die Schwangere, ich bin die Reihe von 13 Gewehren. Die Schwangere, ich bin die Reihe von 13 Gewehren. Ich bin ein Kriegsverräterprozess. Ich bin kein artiges Kind, das darf nur heimlich lösen sein Haar und lassen es flattern im Wind. Der spinnerte Wind, das himmlische Kind. Und ich drehe mich um einen Turm mit hohen Balkonen, auf dem eine Frau steht und still und heimlich ihr Haar löst. Aber nein, diese Frau bin ich nicht, bin ich doch, bin ich nicht, will ich nie wieder sein. Meine Freunde versteht.
Wow.
Thank you. Dankeschön.
And this is also the poem that you've been performing on your tour in India with Alif.
Yeah, I do work together with Alif. Alif is a rock band. Alif's frontman is from Kashmir. He sings in Urdu and Kashmiri, but the whole band is based in Pune and Mumbai. Right. But with Alif, it sounds completely different. I mean, really, the tunes and the chords are different. So
and the fact that he sings in Hindi as well, in Urdu as well, and it's the same poem, but it sounds so different. And would you like to talk a little bit about the medium? I mean, the fact that there's so much going on here, the video, the imagery, your expressions, and how you're able to play with your voice in the background when it's a produced video.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I love working with colleagues because when you write your poetry or your books, whatever, you're quite alone. And then the book is out and you're touring. And again, you're alone, even though you perform before public, but still this is quite a solitary situation. And that's why I love working with other poets, with musicians, with media artists, with filmmakers. And what I especially love is taking the same poem and giving it to different colleagues. So this kind of poem, that's why this poem sounds so different here than perhaps with Alif in concerts here throughout India, because this this clip is resulting on a collaboration with an Ukrainian poet and musician. His name is Grigory Semenchuk, and he is a rapper, a great poet, curator and activist in Ukraine. And we have this band Landschaft. Actually, it's just the two of us, him with the electronics, me with the vocals, and we're both kind of rapping our own poetry. So we never write songs or something like that. It's all based on poetry that you would find in our books. But when it's out, seeing that the music industry has changed and people don't buy really CDs anymore because they want to watch something, and we kind of wanted to give a tribute to that, but not give our poetry away. So we ask a media artist to work with us and not do like an ordinary music clip, but do some piece of art out of this. And that's how it came to a collaboration with a German, actually a documentary filmmaker from the eastern part of Germany, who is exactly my age, so he knows very well what I'm talking about.
We seem to be running short of time. There are so many things we want to talk about, but there's one particular thing. I mean, of course, this wasn't played with the English subtitles, but there is a video of Ulrike singing with Alif on YouTube, which does have the subtitles, and I was very struck by this imagery.
You will find the videos, this one and the videos with with Alif, on my channel. So just check out on YouTube, and my channel name is just my clear name. This is the ad part.
So the imagery, the song sounds very soothing, and especially given what a husky tone your voice has. But the imagery is one of violence, where you speak of hair cropped short, and even from that, there's a sense of freedom that it can fly in the wind. And I was thinking often about how a woman's hair is associated so much with sexuality, whether it's the Greek myths or whether it's the fact that modesty involves the covering of hair. And I'm not just with Islam, with Judaism, even with Hinduism or Sikhism or whatever, there are rituals during which one's hair is covered as if it's a sign of respect. So maybe you could speak a little bit, and of course in the sort of medieval times, getting your hair cut was a form of punishment. So maybe...
So that has changed, as it is changing in India as well, as I see from many people who are here in this festival. it is. I think in Germany it's still there is this notion of having loose hair as a sign of leading a free life, but it goes further than that, because cropping your hair short doesn't mean punishing yourself or being punished. It means it's going further in a sense of free yourself from traditional boundaries. And what I'm doing here in this poem is I'm citing poem by a 19th century poet from Germany, Annette von Droste-Hülshoff, for the ones who are into German poetry. And I'm citing her here because in a poem that is quite popular in Germany, she says, I'm standing here on a balcony and I am just dreaming of letting my hair loose and being a soldier myself. So, because she stands, I suppose she stands there with a braid or something like that. So what I'm saying is I'm going a step further and said, can you see my hair move in the wind? Because I actually cropped it short, so I'm going further than that. I even don't need to have my hair loose, because it's more than that.
We're going to close, before we open up the floor to questions, we'll close with a little reading, but before we do the reading, we were speaking about the fact that fairy tales are called fairy tales, but they're actually the Brothers Grimm, their stories are very grim without the extra M. I mean, they're pretty morbid.
True, so true.
They've been given happy endings and sanitized for children, but Hansel and Gretel didn't go back. They weren't rescued. And you were speaking about how folktales are actually lessons.
Yes. So these Grimm fairy tales. Grimm is just the surname of the two brothers, Jakob and Wilhelm Grimm, who collected them from partly oral, partly written heritage. But they said it was oral because it was the Romantic times. But these collections actually doesn't have a single fairy in it. So it's actually folk tales. Folk tales people told each others, not only their children, but also their brothers. Or there was especially also folk tales who were transferred from woman to woman, so throughout the generations. So they were taught for educational reasons, as warnings, mostly as warnings. So they are quite dark and destructive, but in the way they were collected by Jakob and Wilhelm Grimm, they were also. It reads, when you read the original German version, not the revised version, it reads rather modern, because they revised it in order to make them sound more oral, which resulted in a quite short and minimalist way, which I just love. And I love the grimness of it, because this grimness for me is kind of a means to express my grim on modern times nightmares.
So we've got a little performance for you.
Yes. As I love spontaneous improv performances, I asked Nandini Krishnan, who I never met before, when I met her 2 hours ago, I thought I loved her voice. Doesn't she have a great voice? So I asked her to just read the English translation for you guys, and I will try to do some improv on it. I just guess I need to stand up for this.
So the poem is called Grimm, and
it's Grimm with 2 M, but it also has a lot of grim in it. So
we wrote each other messages on raw eggs. We viewed the scratches and loops we made on the shell as hopeful signs that, despite what had been lost, we could write literally anything to each other, at least on raw eggs. And in the tall buildings that swayed as if made for shifting softly along with the bright velocity of the earth, We wrote on raw eggs, and according to the degree of urgency, we pressed extra hard till another cracked. Pah, no problemo.
War kein Problem. Wir hatten ja eine gegen unendlich gehende Menge an rohen Eiern im Kühlschrank. War kein Problem. Wir hatten ja eine gegen unendlich gehende Menge an rohen Eiern im Kühlschrank. War kein Problem.
We had a well-nigh limitless supply of raw eggs in the fridge. There they sat, perfect and fragile, hanging like balloons full of future on the horizon, beyond which the night winds blow forever, or so we'd heard. In our skyscrapers, it was always New Year and Easter rolled into one. And if something came apart, the whole facade was gone in a flash, and we could see one another, hair streaming and completely unfazed in the crumbling ruins that collapsed round our ears, one by one, as we had fun smashing eggs. We raised our sticky arms in salute and waved in greeting, then lowered our heads to a well-nigh limitless supply of fragments and rage most grim.
War kein Problem. Wir hatten ja eine gegen unendlich gehende Menge an rohen Eiern im Kühlschrank. War kein Problem. Wir hatten ja eine gegen unendlich gehende Menge an rohen Eiern im Kühlschrank, im Kühlschrank, im Kühlschrank, im Kühlschrank, im Kühlschrank, im Kühlschrank, im Kühlschrank. Thank you. Thank you.
We are very short of time, but I'm so glad we could squeeze so much in. And isn't she a fantastic performer? She's. Do we have? I think we'll have time for a couple of questions. Any questions? Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the amazing performance. I just wanted to ask you how you thought that the spoken word poetry as it has emerged, how it has changed, how poetry it has spread from a place to another, or how it has grown, basically.
In Germany or in India or
just in general, however
okay. So the spoken word scene in Germany didn't start until, I'd say, the 1980s, but it was like a sort of protest against the romantic and focused on written language sort of literature the elder generations did. But it was also protesting against the guilt in our German heritage. So throughout the first generations of spoken word culture in Germany, it was kind of trying not to include any tradition at all, which of course had a certain limit. And now, what I find now in my generation and the younger generation is that it as a performance poet, you are free to work with a rich heritage of traditions, because the literary tradition in Germany is of course very oral, because there was poetry long before there were books, of course. So what it does now, it's actually this, that I feel like that the spoken word scene tends to have a richer culture, because it works with
different with traditions from different centuries. Whereas when I am in spoken word sessions in India, I feel like that spoken word poets in India are a bit hesitant to work with their oral culture, because oral in a sense of literary, still literary but musical, because as I know and as I've learned throughout the years, is that the rich heritage of literature in Sanskrit and Prakrit texts, they were all sung. But spoken word poets nowadays in India, I didn't meet a lot of poets who dare to sing or to dare to add the musical aspects of their language. And I met more spoken words poets who used spoken word literature as a means of autobiographically telling about, like, witnessing with the things what they were, like a means of political statement, and a very prose language. And I sometimes wish that India would explore more of their musical heritage in language and oral heritage. That's what I think, looking from the outside.
They've held up the sign saying it's a wrap, and I can see the volunteers biting their nails. So I think we'll close for now. But anyone, no, you can ask. Ulrike is around. Satyendra, Ulrike is around, and
just
you
one
can ask.
question.
No,
nothing happens in 2 minutes.
We have a session coming up now, so I'll hand over the mic. But she's around, and you can approach her off stage.
No, I want everybody should be heard. No? Whatever we said and whatever she says, everybody should be heard.